The dusty plains of southern Colorado stretched endlessly before Beatrice Jameson as she stood at the edge of her father's sprawling ranch, her calico dress billowing in the hot August wind of 1882, knowing that accepting Cornelius Whitmore's proposal would trap her in a gilded cage for the rest of her life. She was 20 years old, and every person in Trinidad expected her to say yes to the railroad magnate's son. Her father, Gerald Jameson, certainly expected it. He had built his cattle empire from nothing, arriving in Colorado territory in the early 60s with just a horse and determination. Now he owned 15,000 acres, employed 30 men, and commanded respect throughout Las Animas County. But respect was not enough for Gerald Jameson. He wanted prestige, the kind that came from aligning with Eastern money and power. Beatrice. Her father's voice carried across the porch where she stood. Cornelius will be here within the hour. I expect you to give him your answer. She turned to face him, this man who had taught her to ride before she could properly walk, who had let her help with the roundups when other girls were learning needlepoint. His weathered face was set in hard lines now, all business and expectation. Papa, I have told you, I do not love him. Love. Gerald dismissed the word with a wave of his thick hand. Love is a luxury, girl. Security is what matters. Cornelius can give you everything. A mansion in Denver, servants, a life of ease. What more could you want? Everything, Beatrice thought. She wanted the freedom to breathe, to ride across open land without someone dictating her every move. She wanted to make her own choices, live by her own terms. Cornelius Whitmore was handsome enough, educated at Yale, impeccably mannered. He was also controlling, dismissive of her opinions, and had made it clear that once they married, she would leave behind her rustic pursuits and become a proper society wife. I want to be myself, she said quietly. Her father's expression hardened further. You are being foolish and romantic. This match will secure your future and benefit this ranch. The railroad connection alone would be invaluable. Before Beatrice could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. But it was not Cornelius Whitmore arriving early. Instead, 3 ranch hands rode into the yard, dust rising from their horses' hooves. Her father's foreman, Dutch Myers, led them, and behind him rode 2 other men. One was familiar, a veteran hand named Tom Silverton. The other was new. Beatrice found her gaze drawn to the stranger. He sat his horse with an easy confidence, his broad shoulders relaxed despite what must have been a long ride. He wore typical working clothes, denim trousers and a faded blue shirt, a worn hat pulled low against the sun. As the men dismounted, he looked up briefly, and she caught sight of his face. Strong features, tanned from outdoor work, with striking green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with the lean, capable build of a man accustomed to hard labor. "Boss," Dutch called out, approaching the porch. "This here is Fletcher Reeves. He is looking for work. Came up from New Mexico way, has experience with cattle and horses. I figured with the fall roundup coming, we could use an extra hand." Gerald studied the newcomer with a critical eye. Fletcher met his gaze steadily, respectfully but without subservience. Beatrice noticed the way he held himself, the quiet dignity in his bearing. "You have references?" Gerald asked. Fletcher reached into his shirt pocket and produced a folded paper. "From the Box T Ranch outside Santa Fe. Worked there 2 years. Before that I was in Arizona." Gerald took the letter, scanned it quickly. "Says here you are good with breaking horses." "I do all right, sir. I prefer working with them rather than breaking them if I am being honest. Most horses respond better to patience than force. Patience does not get the work done fast." "No, sir, but it gets it done right. Something flickered in Gerald's expression, a hint of approval perhaps. "We pay $30 a month plus board. Work starts before dawn, ends when the work is done. I run a tight operation here." "That is what I am looking for, sir. Honest work for honest pay. Dutch will show you the bunkhouse and get you settled. You start tomorrow." Fletcher nodded, then his gaze shifted momentarily to Beatrice. Their eyes met for just a second, but in that brief moment, she felt something shift inside her, like the first tremor before an earthquake. He touched the brim of his hat in a polite gesture, then turned to follow Dutch and Tom toward the bunkhouse. "Get inside and make yourself presentable," Gerald told Beatrice. "Cornelius will expect you to look like a lady, not a ranch girl." She wanted to argue that she was a ranch girl, that it was precisely who she was, but she held her tongue. Instead, she went inside to the room she had occupied her entire life, with its simple furnishings and the few treasures she had collected over the years. A hawk's feather, smooth stones from the creek, a photograph of her mother who had died of fever when Beatrice was 12. Her mother had been different from the other ranchers' wives, educated and artistic, always slightly out of place in the rough frontier society. Beatrice remembered her reading poetry aloud, teaching her about music and art and ideas. It was from her mother that she had inherited her independent spirit, her restlessness with conventional expectations. Now, as she changed into a more formal dress and attempted to tame her dark hair into something resembling civilization, Beatrice thought about the stranger who had just arrived. Fletcher Reeves. There had been something in his eyes, a kind of understanding or recognition that she could not quite name. She told herself not to be foolish. He was simply another cowhand, and she had enough complications in her life without inventing more. Cornelius arrived exactly on time, as he always did, in a polished carriage that looked absurdly out of place against the rough ranch buildings. He was 32, dark-haired and well-groomed, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most of the ranch hands earned in a year. When he stepped down from the carriage, he made a visible effort not to wrinkle his nose at the earthy smells of the ranch. "My dear Beatrice." He took her hand and pressed a dry kiss to her knuckles. "You look lovely, as always, though I do wish you would wear the sapphire necklace I gave you. It would complement that dress beautifully." "It is too valuable to wear while working," she said. "Working." He said the word as if it were distasteful. "That is precisely what I wanted to discuss with you today. Once we are married, all of that will be behind you. You will never have to labor again." They walked together in the garden her mother had planted years ago, now somewhat overgrown but still beautiful in its wild way. Cornelius spoke at length about his plans for their future, the house he was having built in Denver, the social circle they would move in, the parties and galas they would attend. He described it all with enthusiasm, never once asking what she might want. "You will need to hire a proper lady's maid," he said, "and we will have to do something about your complexion. You have become quite sun-darkened. Ladies of society maintain their pale skin." "I like the sun," Beatrice said. "Of course you do, but that is only because you have not known anything else. Once you experience the refinements of city life, you will wonder how you ever tolerated this rustic existence." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Cornelius, what if I do not want to leave this life?" He laughed, actually laughed as if she had made a joke. "Do not be absurd. No woman of sense would choose this over what I am offering. Your father understands the value of this match. I had hoped you would as well." "The value," she repeated. "You speak of it like a business transaction." "All marriages are business transactions, my dear, the successful ones at least. Romantic love is a pleasant fiction for novels. What matters is compatibility of station, shared goals, mutual benefit. And what are my goals in this arrangement? Cornelius looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Why, to be my wife, to manage my household, to provide me with heirs, to grace my social occasions. What other goals would a woman have? In that moment, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that she could not marry him. The knowledge settled over her like a weight, but also like a relief. She had been wavering, influenced by her father's pressure and the expectations of everyone around her. But hearing Cornelius lay out his vision of their future, seeing herself reduced to a decorative object in his life, she knew she would rather face poverty and disgrace than accept this fate. "I cannot marry you," she said. His expression shifted from puzzlement to disbelief. "I beg your pardon. I am sorry, Cornelius. I know this is not what you or my father want to hear, but I cannot marry you. We do not suit each other." "Not suit each other." His voice rose. "Beatrice, I am offering you everything a woman could desire. Do you have any idea how many young ladies in Denver would leap at this opportunity? Then I suggest you propose to one of them. I am sure they will make you very happy." His face flushed with anger. "Your father will have something to say about this. I imagine he will, but the decision is mine to make." Cornelius stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "You are making a tremendous mistake. You will regret this, I assure you. When you are old and alone, working your fingers to the bone on this failing ranch, you will remember this day and curse your foolishness." He stormed back to his carriage and departed without another word, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Beatrice stood in the garden, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had actually refused him. Now came the hard part. Facing her father, Gerald's reaction was even worse than she had anticipated. He raged through the house, shouting about ingratitude and foolishness and throwing away opportunities. He forbade her from leaving the property. He threatened to cut off her allowance, though she had never had much of one to begin with. Finally, exhausted by his own anger, he delivered his ultimatum. "You have 1 month," he said coldly. 1 month to come to your senses and write to Cornelius, begging him to reconsider. If you do not, then you will leave this ranch. I will not support a daughter who defies me so completely. Papa, please. I mean it, Beatrice. I worked too hard to build this empire to watch you destroy valuable connections out of childish rebellion. You will apologize to Cornelius and accept his proposal, or you will leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." She wanted to argue to make him understand, but she could see it was useless. Her father's pride had been wounded, and when Gerald Jameson's pride was wounded, he became immovable. That night, Beatrice lay awake in her bed, watching moonlight stream through her window and wondering what she would do. She had no money of her own, no skills that would earn her a living in town. She could ride and rope and help run a ranch, but those were not accomplishments that translated to respectable employment for a woman. She could perhaps find work as a seamstress or a cook, though she was only moderately skilled at either. The reality of her situation pressed down on her like a physical weight. The next few days passed in tense silence. Gerald barely spoke to her, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. Beatrice threw herself into work around the ranch, helping in the garden, tending to the chickens, anything to stay busy and avoid thinking about her uncertain future. It was during one of these self-imposed tasks that she encountered Fletcher Reeves again. She was carrying water to the kitchen garden in the early morning, the sun just beginning to heat the day, when she noticed him working with a young horse in the breaking pen. But breaking seemed the wrong word for what he was doing. Beatrice set down her bucket and moved closer, intrigued despite herself. Fletcher stood in the center of the pen with a 2-year-old bay, holding a long lead rope. He was not forcing the horse to do anything, just standing quietly, occasionally moving in slow, deliberate steps. The horse, initially skittish, gradually began to relax, its ears swiveling forward with curiosity rather than back with fear. She watched for perhaps 20 minutes as Fletcher worked. He never raised his voice, never made sudden movements. Instead, he seemed to be communicating with the horse through patience and body language, building trust rather than demanding submission. Eventually, the bay approached him voluntarily, and Fletcher rewarded it with gentle strokes along its neck. "That is remarkable," Beatrice said without thinking. Fletcher turned toward her, his green eyes registering surprise. "Morning, Miss Jameson. Did not realize I had an audience. I apologize. I did not mean to interrupt." "No interruption. Just getting this young fellow accustomed to human contact." He gave the horse a final pat and walked over to the fence where Beatrice stood. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before: the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the calloused but careful hands, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "You have a gift with horses," she said. "Not a gift, really, just patience and attention. Most animals respond well if you take the time to understand them, see things from their perspective. Most people could benefit from the same approach." He studied her for a moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see more than she intended to show. "I reckon you are right about that, Miss Jameson. Please call me Beatrice. When people say Miss Jameson, I always look around for someone more formal." A smile tugged at his lips. "Only if you call me Fletcher. Mr. Reeves makes me feel like I should be wearing a suit and working in an office." "I cannot imagine you in an office." "No. What can you imagine me doing?" The question was innocent enough, but something in his tone, the way he looked at her, made her aware of an undercurrent she had not expected. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I can imagine you doing exactly what you are doing now," she said. "Working with horses, understanding them. It suits you." "And what suits you, Beatrice?" The question caught her off guard. Most people never asked what suited her. They simply told her what she should do, who she should be. "I am not entirely sure anymore. I thought I knew, but lately everything has become complicated." Fletcher leaned against the fence rail, his posture relaxed but his attention focused entirely on her. Complicated how? She should not confide in him. He was a ranch hand, a stranger who had been here less than a week. But something about his quiet presence, the way he listened without judgment, loosened her tongue. "My father wants me to marry a man from Denver, a wealthy man who can provide social connections and financial benefits." I refused, and now my father has given me a month to change my mind or leave the ranch. Fletcher's expression did not change dramatically, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, anger perhaps, or sympathy. "And this wealthy man, you do not care for him?" "I barely know him, if I am being honest. He is handsome and educated and everything a woman is supposed to want. But he sees me as an acquisition, something to display in his fine house. He has already planned out my entire life, and in his plans, I have no voice, no choices. I am simply meant to be grateful for his attention." Sounds like a horse he wants to break rather than a partner he wants to know. The analogy was so apt that Beatrice laughed despite herself. "Yes, exactly like that. My father thinks I am being foolish and romantic. He says love is a luxury and security is what matters." "Security matters," Fletcher agreed. "But so does freedom. I have worked ranches from Texas to Montana, and I have seen what happens when you cage something that is meant to run free. It dies inside, even if it keeps breathing." His words resonated deep within her, articulating what she had felt but could not properly express. "That is what I am afraid of, that I will become a hollow version of myself, going through the motions of a life that is not truly mine." They stood in silence for a moment, the morning air warming around them, the sounds of the ranch waking up providing a familiar backdrop. Then Fletcher said, "What would you do if you were not afraid, if you could choose anything?" No one had ever asked her that before. Beatrice thought about it, really thought about it. "I would stay here or somewhere like here. I would work with the land and the animals. I would make my own decisions and live by my own terms. Maybe I would have my own small place eventually, nothing grand, just enough to be independent. And if I married, it would be to someone who saw me as an equal, not a possession." Fletcher nodded slowly, as if her answer made perfect sense. "Those do not seem like unreasonable wants." My father would disagree. "Maybe, but it is your life, is not it? Seems to me a person should have some say in how they live it." "That is easy to say when you are a man. You can go where you please, work where you please, answer to no one but yourself. Women do not have that freedom." "No, they do not," Fletcher acknowledged, "and that is not right or fair. But I have known a few women who made their own way despite the obstacles. It was not easy for them, but they did it. Took courage and determination, but they did it. What happened to them? They lived lives they could be proud of. That is more than a lot of people can say." Beatrice found herself smiling at him, this stranger who seemed to understand her better after one conversation than Cornelius had after months of courtship. "Thank you for listening. I should let you get back to your work. Any time you need an ear, I am happy to provide one." As she walked back toward the house, water bucket forgotten, Beatrice felt something she had not felt in weeks: hope. It was fragile and uncertain, but it was there. Over the following days, she found herself seeking out Fletcher's company more and more. Not obviously, not in a way that would provoke gossip among the ranch hands or draw her father's attention, but in small moments throughout the day. She would happen to be near the breaking pen when he was working with horses. He would happen to be washing up at the pump when she was drawing water. They would exchange a few words, nothing that could be called improper, but each conversation deepened the connection between them. She learned that he was 26 years old, originally from Missouri. His parents had died when he was young, and he had been raised by an uncle who trained horses for the army. He had learned his patient methods from a Cheyenne man his uncle had hired, someone who understood animals in a way most white men did not. Fletcher had been working ranches since he was 16, moving from place to place, never staying long. "Why not settle somewhere?" Beatrice asked one evening as they stood by the creek that ran through the property, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Fletcher skipped a stone across the water's surface. "Never found a reason to, I suppose. Most places I was just another hired hand. Do the work, collect the pay, move on when the season ends. It is a simple life, but it is honest. You never want more. A place of your own, perhaps." "Sometimes. But land costs money, and I have never been much good at saving. I see a horse that needs help or a person in trouble, and my money seems to disappear." He smiled self-deprecatingly. "Not the most practical way to live. No, but it is a kind way to live. I think that matters more." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the intensity of his gaze made her heart skip. "You are not like other women I have met, Beatrice. Is that good or bad? It is remarkable." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Beatrice knew she should step back, maintain proper distance, but she found herself unable to move. Fletcher reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and that simple touch sent warmth cascading through her entire body. "I should not," he said quietly. "You are the boss's daughter, and I am just a cowhand. There is no future in this." "I know," she whispered, but neither of them stepped apart. "If circumstances were different," Fletcher continued, If you were not dealing with your father's ultimatum and I was not depending on this job to get me through winter, I would court you properly. I would ask your father's permission and bring you flowers and do everything according to society's rules. I do not care about society's rules. Maybe not, but breaking them has consequences, especially for you. He was right, of course. Any hint of impropriety between her and a ranch hand would destroy what little reputation she had left. Her father would dismiss Fletcher immediately, and she would be even more isolated than she already was. But knowing all of this did not change what she felt. I should go, she said, even as every part of her wanted to stay. Yeah, Fletcher agreed, but his hand had moved to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. You should definitely go. Neither of them moved. Then, slowly, as if drawn by a force neither could resist, they leaned toward each other. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Beatrice had been kissed before, by Cornelius and by a boy at a church social when she was 17, but this was different. This felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. We cannot do this, Fletcher said, though his hand remained on her cheek. I know. It would ruin everything. I know. But God help me, Beatrice. I am falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. She should tell him it was impossible, that they barely knew each other, that love was not enough to overcome the obstacles they faced. Instead, she said, I am falling in love with you too. They stood there by the creek as darkness fell around them, holding each other and knowing that what they felt was as real as it was complicated. Eventually, reluctantly, they parted and returned to the ranch building separately, each lost in thought about what came next. The following week, Cornelius Whitmore returned. He arrived unannounced, his carriage rolling into the ranch yard just after breakfast. Beatrice was helping hang laundry when she saw him, and her stomach sank. She had hoped he would accept her rejection and move on, but clearly he was not a man accustomed to hearing no. Beatrice, he called out, approaching her with determined strides. We need to talk. She set down the shirt she had been hanging and faced him. Cornelius, I thought I made myself clear when we last spoke. You were upset and confused. I have spoken with your father and he has explained the situation. I am willing to forgive your momentary lapse in judgment. Forgive. I have done nothing that requires forgiveness. I simply declined your proposal. A decision made hastily and emotionally. I am giving you the opportunity to reconsider. Several ranch hands had stopped working to watch the exchange, drawn by the raised voices. Beatrice spotted Fletcher among them, standing near the barn with Dutch and Tom. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. I appreciate the offer, Beatrice said, trying to keep her voice calm and measured, but my answer remains the same. We are not suited for each other. Cornelius's jaw tightened. You need to think very carefully about what you are doing. Your father has made his position clear. If you persist in this foolishness, you will have nowhere to go, no means of support. You will be dependent on the charity of others, assuming anyone would be willing to help a woman who has brought disgrace on herself. Disgrace? I have brought no disgrace. I have simply chosen not to marry you. You have rejected an advantageous match out of childish stubbornness. That shows poor judgment and willfulness, traits no respectable family would want in a wife or an employee. Your prospects, my dear, are non-existent. Then I will make new prospects. Cornelius laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Doing what? Scrubbing floors, taking in washing. You have been raised in comfort, Beatrice. You have no idea what poverty truly means. Maybe not, but I am willing to learn. What I am not willing to do is sell myself for security. Sell yourself. His voice rose sharply. "I am offering you marriage, not propositioning you for something sordid. You should be grateful for my interest. And you should be grateful for my honesty. I would make you a terrible wife, Cornelius. You deserve someone who wants the life you are offering. What I deserve is respect and consideration, neither of which you are showing me." He stepped closer, his hand reaching for her arm, and suddenly Fletcher was there between them, moving fast but not aggressively, simply placing himself in Cornelius's path. "I think the lady has made her position clear," Fletcher said quietly. Cornelius stared at him with barely concealed contempt. "And who exactly are you?" "One of the ranch hands, and I am suggesting you step back and let Miss Jameson return to her work." "You are suggesting," Cornelius's face flushed red. "You are a hired worker, addressing your betters. How dare you interfere in a private conversation? Did not seem all that private, seeing as how you were doing your talking in the middle of the yard where everyone could hear." Gerald Jameson emerged from the house, alerted by the commotion. "What in the hell is going on here?" "Your hired man," Cornelius said, practically spitting the words, "has decided to insert himself where he does not belong. I was having a conversation with Beatrice about her future and this person interrupted us." Gerald's gaze swung to Fletcher, cold and dangerous. "Reeves, get back to work. Now." "Yes, sir," Fletcher said. He glanced at Beatrice, a look that contained volumes, then walked away toward the barn. "I apologize for my employee's behavior," Gerald told Cornelius. "It will not happen again. Now about my daughter." "Your daughter needs to learn her place," Cornelius interrupted. "And apparently your staff needs the same lesson. I came here in good faith, offering Beatrice a chance to rectify her mistake, but I am met with disrespect and insolence." "Beatrice," Gerald said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "go to your room. Cornelius and I will discuss this matter privately." "Papa, there is nothing to discuss. I will not change my mind. Your room. Now." She wanted to refuse, to stand her ground, but the look in her father's eyes warned her that pushing further would only make things worse. With as much dignity as she could muster, Beatrice walked into the house, leaving the two men to their discussion. From her window, she watched them talk for what seemed like an eternity. She could not hear their words, but their body language told the story. Cornelius was animated, gesturing sharply. Her father stood with arms crossed, his posture rigid. Eventually, Cornelius returned to his carriage and left, and Gerald stood alone in the yard for a long moment before turning back toward the house. When he entered her room, his face was thunderous. "That was your last chance," he said. "Cornelius has withdrawn his offer. He will not be humiliated further by chasing after a woman who does not appreciate his worth." "I am sorry you are disappointed, Papa." "Sorry? You are sorry," he laughed bitterly. "You have thrown away your future, embarrassed me in front of a valuable business connection, and created a spectacle in front of the hired help. Sorry does not begin to cover what you should be feeling. I cannot marry someone I do not love. Then you will learn to live without the comforts this ranch provides. You have 2 weeks, Beatrice. 2 weeks to pack your belongings and make arrangements for wherever you will go. After that, you are no longer welcome here." The finality in his voice left no room for argument. He walked out, closing the door firmly behind him, and Beatrice sank onto her bed, the full weight of her situation pressing down on her. She had known this was coming, had chosen this path deliberately, but the reality still hit hard. In 2 weeks, she would be homeless and penniless, cast out by her own father. That evening, Fletcher found her sitting by the creek again, this same spot that had become their unofficial meeting place. He approached quietly, sitting down beside her on the grass. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have interfered this afternoon. I probably made things worse for you. You were defending me. I cannot fault you for that." Your father was furious. He called me into his office after Whitmore left, said if I ever speak out of turn again, I will be looking for a new job. "Fletcher, I am so sorry. I never wanted to cause problems for you. You did not cause anything. I made my own choice." He picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hands. "What will you do when the 2 weeks are up?" "I have been trying to figure that out. I have a little money saved, not much. Maybe enough for a stage-coach ticket and a few nights in a boarding house. I thought I might go to Denver, look for work as a seamstress or a shop girl." "Denver is expensive. Your money would not last long." "I know, but what other choice do I have?" Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "There is another option. It is not a good option, not a respectable one, but it is an option." "What do you mean?" "We could leave together. Head west, maybe to California or Oregon. Plenty of ranches need workers, and I could find employment easily enough. You could work too, maybe cooking for a ranch outfit or helping with horses. It would be hard work, and we would be poor for a while, but we would be together." Beatrice's heart leaped at the possibility, but reality quickly tempered her excitement. "Fletcher, if we left together unmarried, we would be ruined. No respectable employer would hire us. That is why we would get married first. Find a justice of the peace, do it legal and proper. I know it is not romantic, and I do not have much to offer you, but I love you, Beatrice. I think I loved you from the first moment I saw you standing on that porch, looking like you wanted to break free and fly away. I can give you freedom, if nothing else. The freedom to make your own choices and live your own life. You would marry me. Even though I have no dowry, no connections, nothing to bring to the marriage, you would bring yourself. That is everything I want." Tears stung Beatrice's eyes. This was not how she had imagined a proposal. There was no bending knee, no pretty speech, no ring. But it was honest and real, offered by a man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Fletcher let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy mixed together. He took her hands in his, and they sat there in the gathering darkness, planning their future in hushed, excited voices. They would need to move quickly and quietly. Fletcher had some money saved, enough to get them to Santa Fe where he knew people who might help. They could marry there, then continue west to California where opportunities were more plentiful. "Your father will come after us," Beatrice said. "When he discovers I am gone, he will be furious. Maybe, but you will be my wife by then, legally married. There would not be much he could do about it. He could make things difficult for us. He could try. But we will be careful and smart. Once we are out of Colorado, we will be just another young couple heading west. Nobody special, nobody worth pursuing." They agreed to leave in 5 days, after Fletcher received his month's pay. That would give them a better financial cushion for the journey. In the meantime, they would act as if nothing had changed, going about their daily routines to avoid suspicion. The next few days were the longest of Beatrice's life. She went through the motions of normal activity, helping with household tasks, avoiding her father as much as possible. At night, she secretly packed a small bag with her most essential belongings, clothes that would be practical for travel, her mother's photograph, a few keepsakes she could not bear to leave behind. She wrote a letter to her father, trying to explain her choice, hoping he might someday understand if not forgive. Fletcher worked his regular shifts, drawing no attention to himself. They met only briefly and in public places, careful not to fuel gossip. But Beatrice could feel his presence even when he was not near, could sense the promise of the future they were building together. On the 4th day, disaster nearly struck. Dutch Myers approached Fletcher while he was working in the barn, his weathered face creased with concern. "Got a question for you, Reeves," he said, leaning against a stall door. "And I want an honest answer." Fletcher continued brushing the horse he was grooming, keeping his movements steady. "All right. You got feelings for the boss's daughter?" The question hung in the air between them. Fletcher could lie, deny everything, but Dutch was not a fool. "Why do you ask?" "Because I got eyes, son. And I have seen the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. I have been working ranches for 30 years, and I know what sparks look like when I see them." Fletcher set down the brush and faced the older man directly. "Would it matter if I did?" "Might. See, the boss has been in a foul temper lately. He is looking for someone to blame for his daughter refusing that railroad man. If he gets wind that you and Miss Beatrice have been spending time together, he will put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5. You understand what I am saying?" "I do." "So I am asking you, as someone who has worked alongside you these past weeks and found you to be a decent man, are you planning something foolish?" Fletcher studied Dutch's face, trying to gauge his intentions. The foreman had always been fair with him, respectful and straightforward. "If I were," Fletcher said carefully, "would you feel obligated to tell the boss?" Dutch sighed heavily. "That depends. You planning to hurt that girl, take advantage of her situation?" "No, sir. I am planning to marry her if she will have me." "Marry her?" Dutch shook his head slowly. "You know the boss will never allow it. You will both be cast out." "We have already been cast out, in a manner of speaking. Miss Beatrice is being forced to leave in a week regardless. At least this way she will have someone looking out for her. And you think you can support her?" "On a cowhand's wages. I think we will find a way. I have worked hard all my life and I am not afraid of challenges. Miss Beatrice is stronger than people give her credit for. Together, we will manage." Dutch was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "When are you planning to leave?" "Tomorrow night after I collect my pay." "Where are you heading?" "Better if you do not know. That way you can honestly say you have no idea where we went." "Smart thinking." Dutch pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is your wages through the end of the month. I am giving it to you now because tomorrow is going to be busy with the supply run to town, and I might not have a chance. You understand?" Fletcher understood perfectly. Dutch was giving him his money early so he and Beatrice could leave tonight instead of tomorrow, putting extra distance between them and any pursuit. "I appreciate that, sir. Do not make me regret this. That girl deserves better than what life has handed her so far. You make sure you treat her right." "I will. You have my word." Dutch nodded and walked away, leaving Fletcher standing in the barn with his early wages and a racing heart. He needed to get word to Beatrice that their timeline had moved up. They would leave tonight. Finding a way to communicate with her proved challenging. He could not simply walk up to the main house and ask to speak with her. That would draw exactly the attention they were trying to avoid. Finally, he waited until he saw her walking toward the chicken coop to collect eggs, then intercepted her as she returned. "Tonight," he said quietly, pretending to examine the axe handle he was carrying. "Dutch knows something is going on. He gave me my pay early. We need to leave as soon as it is dark." Beatrice's eyes widened, but to her credit she did not panic. "All right. Where should I meet you?" "The creek where we always meet. Bring only what you can carry easily. I will have horses ready." "Fletcher, are you sure about this?" "More sure than I have ever been about anything." She smiled then, quick and bright, and continued toward the house with her basket of eggs, giving no indication that her life was about to change forever. That evening passed with agonizing slowness. Beatrice ate dinner with her father in tense silence, both of them trapped in their stubborn positions, unable to bridge the gap between them. She looked at him across the table, this man who had raised her, and felt a deep sadness for what could have been. If he had been willing to listen, to try to understand, things might have been different. But Gerald Jameson had built his life on being strong and unbending, and he could not change now. After dinner, she excused herself to her room, claiming a headache. Once there, she changed into her riding clothes and gathered the small bag she had packed. She included the letter she had written to her father, leaving it on her pillow where he would find it in the morning. Then she waited for full darkness, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. When the house finally fell quiet, she crept down the back stairs and out through the kitchen door. The night was moonlit but cloudy, providing intermittent cover as she made her way toward the creek. She moved carefully, avoiding areas where her presence might be noticed, her bag clutched tightly in her hand. Fletcher was already there, waiting with 2 horses saddled and ready. When he saw her, relief washed over his face. "I was starting to worry you had changed your mind," he said softly. "Never. Let us go before anyone sees us." He helped her mount, then swung into his own saddle. They rode slowly at first, keeping the horses quiet, putting distance between themselves and the ranch buildings. Only when they were well away did they urge the horses into a faster pace, heading south toward Santa Fe and their future together. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and check their bearings. Fletcher knew the land well from his years of traveling, and he guided them along less traveled paths, avoiding the main roads where they might be spotted. As dawn began to break over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they stopped at a small stream to water the horses and catch their breath. "How are you holding up?" Fletcher asked, coming to stand beside Beatrice as she splashed cool water on her face. "Tired, but all right." "How much farther to Santa Fe?" "2 more days if we keep a steady pace. We will need to be careful, stay off the main roads as much as possible." Beatrice nodded, then turned to look at him, really look at him. In the morning light, with his hair tousled and his clothes dusty from riding, he had never looked more handsome to her. This man had given up security and comfort for her, was risking his reputation and future because he loved her. "Fletcher Reeves," she said, "I am the luckiest woman alive." He smiled, that slow, warm smile that made her heart skip. "I am pretty sure I am the lucky one here. You ready to keep going? With you. Always." They remounted and continued south, 2 figures moving across the vast landscape of southern Colorado. The terrain was rugged and beautiful, high desert giving way to mountains, then back to rolling plains. They saw few other travelers, which was exactly what they wanted. At night, they camped under the stars, and Fletcher proved to be resourceful at finding shelter and building fires, skills honed from years of outdoor work. On the second night, as they sat by their small campfire eating the simple meal Fletcher had prepared, Beatrice asked, "What do you think my father is doing right now?" Fletcher considered the question. "Probably angry, possibly worried, definitely feeling betrayed. I hate that I hurt him. But I could not live the life he wanted for me. I know. Sometimes love means making difficult choices, even when those choices hurt people we care about. You think he will forgive me someday? Maybe. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But if he loves you, truly loves you, then eventually he will come to understand that you needed to follow your own path. And if he does not, then you will build a new family. With me, with the children we might have someday, with the friends we will make. Family is not just blood, Beatrice. It is the people who stand by you and support your dreams." His words comforted her, and she moved closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until the fire burned low, drawing strength from each other's presence. They reached Santa Fe on the 3rd day, dusty and exhausted but triumphant. The city was bustling with activity, a mix of cultures and languages that reflected its history as a crossroads of trade and travel. Fletcher guided them to a modest boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Garcia, who asked no questions when Fletcher requested 2 rooms. "We will find a justice of the peace tomorrow," Fletcher told Beatrice as they stood in the hallway outside their separate rooms. "Make this official and legal." "Tonight I am not your wife yet," Beatrice said, suddenly feeling shy. "No, but tomorrow you will be, and every day after that for the rest of our lives." The next morning they found a justice of the peace who agreed to marry them for a small fee. The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in a modest office with Mrs. Garcia and her son serving as witnesses. There was no elaborate dress, no flowers, no gathering of family and friends. But when Fletcher took Beatrice's hand and spoke his vows, his voice clear and certain, she felt the weight and importance of the moment. "I, Fletcher Reeves, take you, Beatrice Jameson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by you through whatever challenges we face. I promise to respect your choices and support your dreams. I promise to be your partner in all things, now and always." Beatrice's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her own vows, but her conviction was unshakable. "I, Beatrice Jameson, take you, Fletcher Reeves, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and build a life with you based on honesty and mutual respect. I promise to face whatever comes with courage and trust. I promise to be your partner in all things, now and always." The justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, and when Fletcher kissed her, Beatrice felt simultaneously like she was ending one chapter of her life and beginning another. She was no longer Beatrice Jameson, daughter of Gerald Jameson, expected to follow a prescribed path. She was Beatrice Reeves, wife of Fletcher Reeves, free to make her own choices and forge her own destiny. They spent their wedding night at the boarding house, and in Fletcher's arms, Beatrice discovered a passion and tenderness she had never imagined possible. He was gentle with her, patient, taking time to ensure her comfort and pleasure. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, she felt profoundly grateful for the series of choices that had led her to this moment. "No regrets?" Fletcher asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "None whatsoever, you. Only that I cannot give you the life of luxury you are accustomed to. Fletcher, I never wanted luxury. I wanted freedom and love and partnership. You have given me all of that. I will work hard for us, Beatrice. I promise you that. We will have a good life. We will have an honest life. That is all I ask." They stayed in Santa Fe for a week, and Fletcher found temporary work helping a rancher who needed extra hands for a cattle drive. It was hard work, but the pay was good, and it gave them the financial cushion they needed to continue west. Beatrice spent her days exploring the city, soaking in its vibrant culture, and helping Mrs. Garcia with cooking and cleaning in exchange for reduced rent. It was during this week that they received unexpected news. Mrs. Garcia's son, Miguel, worked at the telegraph office, and one afternoon he brought a telegram addressed to Fletcher. It was from Dutch Myers, the foreman back at Beatrice's father's ranch. The message was brief. "Boss knows where you are. Sent men to bring Beatrice home. Leave immediately." "Good luck." Fletcher and Beatrice looked at each other with alarm. Gerald Jameson was not giving up easily. "We need to go now," Fletcher said, already moving to gather their belongings. "Your father's men could arrive any time." "Where will we go?" "West, like we planned. We will head for California, but we will take a different route, something less obvious. Maybe swing south through Arizona, then up to the coast." They left within the hour, thanking Mrs. Garcia for her hospitality and hitting the road again. This time, they were more cautious, more alert to potential dangers. They traveled with another group of settlers heading west, finding safety in numbers. Fletcher hired on as a scout and guard, using his knowledge of the land to help guide the group, and Beatrice helped with cooking and camp tasks. The journey was arduous. They crossed deserts and mountains, forded rivers and traversed narrow passes. There were days when water was scarce and food was scarcer. There were nights when the temperature dropped so low that Beatrice thought she might freeze despite huddling close to Fletcher under their blankets. But there were also moments of incredible beauty. Sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors, starry nights so clear that the heavens seemed close enough to touch, landscapes so vast and untamed that they made her feel both small and infinite. Through it all, Fletcher remained steady and capable, and Beatrice discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. She learned to cook over an open fire, to mend clothes with minimal supplies, to conserve water and make do with less. She learned that comfort was not about fine houses and elegant dresses. It was about having someone you loved beside you, someone who saw you as an equal and a partner. They reached California in late October of 1882, arriving in a small town called Bakersfield in the San Joaquin Valley. The land here was different from Colorado, flatter and more agricultural, but there were opportunities. Fletcher found work on a large ranch that raised both cattle and crops, and the owner, impressed by Fletcher's skills and work ethic, offered them a small cabin on the property. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. Beatrice threw herself into making it a home, using what little money they had to buy basic necessities and relying on her own resourcefulness for everything else. She planted a small garden, bartered with neighbors for furniture and household goods, and gradually transformed the bare cabin into a comfortable living space. Fletcher worked long hours, but he always came home to her, and they spent their evenings together, talking about their days, making plans for the future, building the life they had chosen. Sometimes Beatrice thought about her father, wondered if he still searched for her or if he had given up and moved on. She felt sad about the breach between them, but she did not regret her choice. She was happier than she had ever been, living a life that was authentically hers. Winter came, mild compared to Colorado winters but still bringing cooler temperatures and rain. Beatrice discovered she was pregnant in January, and the news filled both her and Fletcher with joy mixed with trepidation. They had so little, barely enough to support themselves, let alone a child. But Fletcher took on extra work, and Beatrice found ways to earn money as well, taking in sewing and helping some of the other ranch wives with various tasks. The ranch owner, a man named Thomas Wheeler, proved to be kind and generous. When he learned of Beatrice's pregnancy, he gave Fletcher a raise and offered Beatrice work in the ranch house doing light housekeeping. The extra income made a significant difference, easing their financial worries somewhat. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, she found herself thinking more about her mother, wishing she could ask her questions about childbirth and motherhood. She missed having family around, missed the sense of connection and history that came with familial bonds. But she was also creating her own family now, building something new and precious. Fletcher was attentive and caring throughout her pregnancy, his natural patience and gentleness extending to this new phase of their life together. He built a cradle for the baby, carved from wood he salvaged and sanded smooth. He talked to her growing belly, telling their unborn child stories about horses and the land, about bravery and kindness. He made Beatrice laugh with his terrible jokes and held her when pregnancy discomforts made her cry. Their son was born on a warm evening in September of 1883, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Fletcher was there throughout the birth, holding Beatrice's hand, wiping her forehead, offering encouragement. When the midwife placed their baby in Beatrice's arms, both parents wept with joy and amazement. "He is perfect," Fletcher said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, exhausted but elated. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at their son's tiny face, Fletcher said, "What about Daniel? It means God is my judge." "Seems fitting, given that we have made our own path without regard for what others thought we should do." "Daniel Reeves," Beatrice said, testing the name. "I like it. Daniel Fletcher Reeves. After me, you do not have to do that. I want to." "You are a good man, Fletcher Reeves, and I hope our son grows up to be just like you." The baby's arrival transformed their lives again, bringing new challenges and new joys. Sleepless nights were balanced by the wonder of watching Daniel discover the world. Money remained tight, but they had enough. Their little family was healthy and happy, and that was more than many people could claim. When Daniel was 6 months old, Fletcher came home one evening with news. "Wheeler has offered me the position of assistant foreman. It comes with better pay and a larger house. He says I have proven myself valuable and he wants to make sure we stay." "Fletcher, that is wonderful." Beatrice embraced him, careful not to jostle the baby she held. "You deserve this recognition." "We deserve it," he corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. Your strength and support have made everything possible." They moved into the larger house, a proper 3-bedroom home with a real kitchen and even indoor plumbing, a luxury Beatrice had not expected to enjoy again. The additional space made a tremendous difference, especially with a growing baby who was becoming more active every day. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Fletcher's position as assistant foreman meant more responsibility, but also more stability. Beatrice continued to work part-time helping Mrs. Wheeler, the ranch owner's wife, with various projects. She also began teaching reading and writing to some of the ranch workers' children, using skills her mother had taught her years ago. Daniel grew from baby to toddler, his personality emerging bright and curious. He had Fletcher's green eyes and Beatrice's dark hair, and he seemed to have inherited both parents' love of animals and the outdoors. By the time he was 2, he was following Fletcher around whenever possible, mimicking his father's movements and absorbing everything like a sponge. It was around this time that Beatrice received a letter that would change everything. It arrived via the ranch's mail delivery, addressed to Beatrice Reeves, formerly Jameson, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. With trembling hands, she opened it. The letter was from Dutch Myers, the foreman from her father's ranch. He wrote, "Dear Mrs. Reeves, I hope this letter finds you and Fletcher well. It has taken me some time to locate you, but I felt I must write to inform you of recent events. Your father suffered a serious illness this past winter. He recovered, but it changed him. He has spoken often of you, expressing regret for his harsh treatment and the ultimatum he issued. He asked me to find you if possible, to tell you that he would like to reconcile if you are willing. He understands that you are married and have made a new life, and he respects your choices. He simply wishes to know that you are well and, if possible, to have some contact with you again. The choice is entirely yours, and I will understand if you prefer to let the past remain in the past. Whatever you decide, know that I wish you and your family all the best. Yours respectfully, Dutch Myers." Beatrice read the letter 3 times, emotions swirling inside her. Anger at her father for forcing her out in the first place. Sadness for the years they had lost. Hope that reconciliation might be possible. Fear that reopening this door might bring complications they could not handle. She showed the letter to Fletcher that evening after Daniel was asleep. He read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I do not know." Part of me wants to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back. But another part of me misses my father and would like him to know his grandson. There is no wrong answer here, Beatrice. This is your decision. What would you do? Fletcher considered the question. I think I would give him a chance. Not because he deserves it necessarily, but because you deserve closure, one way or another. If you write back and he proves he has not changed, then you can walk away knowing you tried. But if he has changed, if he genuinely regrets what happened, then maybe you can build something new together. Different from what you had before, but still meaningful. His words resonated with her. That night, after much deliberation, she wrote a response to Dutch, to be forwarded to her father. "Dear Papa, I received word of your illness and am glad you have recovered. I am well and happy. I married Fletcher Reeves, the man I told you about, and we have a son named Daniel who is now 2 years old. We live in California, where Fletcher works as assistant foreman on a ranch. Our life is modest but fulfilling. I was hurt by how we parted, but I understand that you were doing what you thought was best. If you truly wish to have contact, I am willing to correspond by letter and see where that leads. I hope you are in good health. Your daughter, Beatrice." She sent the letter and then tried to put it out of her mind, not allowing herself to hope too much. But 3 weeks later, another letter arrived, this time in her father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Beatrice, I cannot adequately express how relieved I am to hear from you. These past 2 years have been filled with regret for my treatment of you. My illness forced me to confront my own mortality and my failures as a father. I was wrong to issue that ultimatum, wrong to try to force you into a marriage you did not want, wrong to value business connections over your happiness. I understand if you cannot forgive me, but I hope we can at least have some relationship moving forward. I would very much like to meet my grandson someday, if you are amenable. Your loving father, Gerald Jameson." Over the following months, Beatrice and her father exchanged regular letters. Gerald wrote about the ranch, about changes in Trinidad, about his gradual acceptance of his daughter's choices. Beatrice wrote about Daniel's antics, about Fletcher's success at the ranch, about the life they had built in California. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild their relationship, this time on more equal footing. When Daniel was 3, Gerald made the journey to California to visit. Beatrice was nervous as she waited at the train station, Fletcher beside her holding Daniel's hand. She had not seen her father in over 3 years, and she did not know what to expect. When Gerald stepped off the train, Beatrice was shocked by the change in him. He had aged considerably, his hair now completely gray, his movements slower and more careful. But his eyes, when they found hers, were warm and filled with emotion. "Beatrice," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Papa." They stood looking at each other for a long moment, years of hurt and regret hanging between them. Then Gerald opened his arms, and Beatrice stepped into them, feeling like a child again, but also like the woman she had become. They held each other and wept, releasing all the pain and anger and grief they had carried. When they finally separated, Gerald turned his attention to Fletcher, extending his hand. "Fletcher Reeves, I owe you an apology as well. I judged you unfairly, saw you as a threat rather than the good man my daughter recognized you to be." Fletcher shook his hand firmly. "Water under the bridge, sir. What matters is that we move forward." Then Gerald knelt down to Daniel's level. "And you must be my grandson. I have heard so much about you in your mother's letters." Daniel, naturally shy around strangers, hid behind Fletcher's legs at first. But Gerald was patient, and eventually, the boy's curiosity won out. By the time they reached the ranch, Daniel was chattering away to his grandfather, showing him a wooden horse Fletcher had carved. Gerald stayed for 2 weeks, and during that time, healing occurred for all of them. Gerald apologized repeatedly for his past behavior, and while Beatrice could not instantly forget the pain he had caused, she could forgive. She saw genuine remorse in her father, a willingness to change and to accept the choices she had made. Fletcher and Gerald also developed a rapport, talking about ranching and horses and the challenges of working the land. Gerald was impressed by the life his daughter and son-in-law had built, the respect they had earned, the loving home they had created for Daniel. Before he left to return to Colorado, Gerald made an offer. "I would like to help you," he told Fletcher and Beatrice. "Not to control your lives or dictate your choices, but simply to provide some support. I have more money than I can spend, and I would like to invest in your future. Perhaps help you buy your own land someday, start your own ranch. Think of it as an inheritance given early when it can actually be useful." Beatrice and Fletcher looked at each other, communicating silently in the way long married couples can. "We appreciate the offer," Fletcher said carefully, "but we have worked hard to build this life on our own terms. We do not want to feel beholden or obligated." "You would not be. This would be a gift, freely given with no strings attached. You have proven you can make your own way, but there is no shame in accepting help from family. Let me do this for my daughter and grandson. Let me be a better father now than I was before." After much discussion, they agreed to accept his help, not immediately but as a future possibility when the time was right to pursue land of their own. The offer brought additional healing, Gerald's way of showing that he truly had changed, that he now supported rather than opposed his daughter's choices. Over the next several years, the relationship between Beatrice and her father continued to strengthen. Gerald visited California regularly, and Fletcher, Beatrice, and Daniel made one trip back to Colorado, where Beatrice saw her childhood home again and introduced Fletcher to the land that had shaped her. It was emotional and bittersweet, but it provided closure. When Daniel was 6, Fletcher and Beatrice welcomed a daughter they named Clara, after Beatrice's mother. Gerald traveled to California for her birth, and the joy on his face as he held his granddaughter for the first time was a beautiful thing to witness. He had fully transformed into a doting grandfather, the stern, unbending man of the past replaced by someone more flexible and loving. With Gerald's financial help, Fletcher and Beatrice purchased 200 acres of land near Bakersfield when Daniel was 8. It was not a large ranch by cattle baron standards, but it was theirs, owned outright with no debt. They built a modest but comfortable house, started a small herd of cattle, and planted crops. Fletcher's years of experience and Beatrice's determination made them a formidable team. Fletcher proved to be an excellent businessman as well as a skilled rancher. He treated his workers fairly, paid them well, and created a reputation for integrity that brought him loyal employees and strong business relationships. Beatrice managed the household and finances, and she also helped with the animals, especially the horses. She had a gift for gentling them, a skill she had learned from watching Fletcher all those years ago in her father's breaking pen. Their ranch grew slowly but steadily. They never became wealthy in the way Cornelius Whitmore had been wealthy, but they were comfortable and secure. More importantly, they were happy. They had built something together, created a life that reflected their values and their dreams. Daniel grew into a capable young man who shared his father's way with animals and his mother's independent spirit. Clara was bright and curious, always asking questions and challenging assumptions. They were good children who understood the value of hard work and the importance of kindness. Gerald continued to visit regularly until his health began to fail when Daniel was 12. Even in his declining years, he maintained contact through letters, and his relationship with Beatrice remained strong until his death when she was 35 years old. It was sad to lose him, but Beatrice felt grateful that they had reconciled, that she had been able to know her father as more than just the stern man who had tried to control her life. She inherited the ranch in Colorado, which surprised her, but Gerald's will had been clear. Everything went to his daughter and her family. Fletcher and Beatrice considered moving back to Colorado to run it, but ultimately decided to sell it. Their life was in California now, their roots firmly planted there. They used the inheritance to expand their own ranch and to establish a trust fund for their children's futures. As the years passed, Fletcher and Beatrice grew old together, their love deepening rather than fading. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had faced challenges and celebrated triumphs. They had raised 2 children to adulthood, had built a successful ranch, had created a legacy that had nothing to do with wealth or social status and everything to do with integrity and love. Daniel married a local girl named Sarah and took over much of the day-to-day operation of the ranch, proving himself worthy of his father's trust. Clara married a schoolteacher and moved to San Francisco, where she became involved in the growing women's suffrage movement, fighting for the rights and freedoms her mother had claimed for herself years earlier. Fletcher and Beatrice became grandparents multiple times over, their house filled with the laughter and chaos of visiting grandchildren. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to build, and count their blessings. "Do you ever regret it?" Fletcher asked one evening when they were both in their 60s, his hair now silver and his face deeply lined from years of sun and wind. Giving up the easy life for this one, Beatrice took his hand, her own fingers arthritic but still strong. "Not for a single moment. I regret the pain I caused my father initially, but I do not regret choosing you, choosing freedom, choosing this life. You gave me the greatest gift anyone ever could, the chance to be myself." "You gave me the same gift," Fletcher said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "You saw something in a wandering cowhand that nobody else saw. You believed I was worth loving. You were always worth loving. You just needed someone to recognize it." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Their love story had not been conventional or easy, but it had been real and true and lasting. Fletcher passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74, with Beatrice beside him as she had been for over 40 years. His death left a hole in her life that nothing could fill, but she did not drown in grief. Instead, she celebrated the life they had shared, the love they had built, the family they had created. Beatrice lived another 8 years after Fletcher's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her and honored the choices she had made. She spent her final years writing down her story, wanting future generations to understand that freedom and love are worth fighting for, that security without authenticity is a prison, and that the courage to choose your own path is one of the most valuable things a person can possess. She died at the age of 82 in the house she and Fletcher had built, in the bed they had shared, with her children and grandchildren gathered around her. Her last words were simple but profound. "I lived the life I chose, and it was beautiful." Daniel found his mother's written memoir after her death and had it bound into a book for the family. It became a treasured heirloom, passed down through generations, a reminder of the rancher's daughter who rejected wealth for freedom and the cowboy who understood and loved her for it. Their story became part of family legend, inspiration for descendants facing their own difficult choices, proof that love and courage can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The ranch they built remained in the family for generations, growing and changing but always maintaining the values Fletcher and Beatrice had instilled: integrity, hard work, respect for the land and the animals, and the belief that every person deserves the freedom to choose their own path. Their legacy was not measured in acres or dollars, but in the love they shared and the example they set, a testament to what two people can accomplish when they face life as true partners. Years after both Fletcher and Beatrice were gone, their great-grandchildren would still visit their graves, set side by side in a small cemetery overlooking the land they had loved. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single phrase that summed up their life together. They chose love and freedom and built everything else from there. It was a good epitaph for a good life, a love story that began with a rebellious choice and ended with a legacy that would endure for generations. Beatrice had stood on her father's porch in Trinidad, Colorado in 1882, knowing that accepting the conventional path would trap her in a gilded cage. Fletcher had ridden into her life at exactly the right moment, seeing her for who she truly was and offering not riches but something far more valuable: understanding, partnership, and love. Together, they had written their own story, lived their own truth, and created a life that was authentically theirs. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for, and it was more than enough. Their love had been tested by distance and hardship, by family opposition and financial struggle, but it had emerged stronger for all the challenges they faced. They had proven that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or inherited. They must be built with courage, maintained with effort, and treasured with gratitude. The ranch Fletcher and Beatrice created stood as a physical monument to their love and determination, but their true legacy lived in the hearts and minds of those who came after them, carrying forward the lessons they taught through example. That freedom is worth fighting for, that love matters more than status, that integrity cannot be compromised, and that a life lived according to your own values is a life well lived, regardless of what society might say. Their story became the foundation upon which generations built their own lives, each adding their own chapters while honoring the courage of the original pioneers who chose love over wealth and freedom over security. In that way, Fletcher and Beatrice never truly died. They lived on in the choices of their descendants, in the values that shaped the family culture, in the retelling of their story around dinner tables and at family gatherings. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds continued their partnership, their love eternal and unbreakable, a reminder that the best stories are the ones we write ourselves, with courage as our pen and love as our ink.